The sirens never really stopped in Chicago. They just faded in and out like a bad song stuck on repeat. On the 10th floor of St. Augustine Medical Center, the noise came from inside. Monitors beeped, carts squeaked, soles slapped the linoleum in a thin, constant clatter. In Trauma Bay 3, under a pair of two bright lamps, Dr. Elena Cross bent over a split-open abdomen and forgot about everything except blood and light. Her hair was twisted into a tight knot at the back of her head. A few dark strands had worked loose along her temples, damp with sweat. Her hands, wrapped in blue gloves, moved with an economy that did not match the new ID badge clipped to her scrub top. "Hold the retractor steady," she said. The intern across from her swallowed and tried. "Yes, doctor." The patient on the table still did not have a name. The paramedics had called him a John Doe when they wheeled him in 2 bullets in his side and no wallet in his pockets. He had arrived with his shirt cut open, chest rising in desperate shallow jerks. By the time they rolled him through the double doors, his pressure was already crashing. Elena had not waited for anyone. She found the bleeder a slick, pulsing vessel that seemed to hide from the overhead light. The smell of iron and antiseptic burned her nose. Warmth seeped through the gloves, where blood had soaked through the drapes and pooled near her wrists. "Clamp," she said. A pair of hemostats landed in her outstretched hand, metal cold against the warmth of the room. She clamped tied off, and the red fountain slowed to a sluggish ooze. "Heart rate is climbing," the anesthesiologist murmured. "Pressure is better." "Good," Elena answered. "We are not losing him tonight." The intern tried to lighten the mood. "You sound pretty confident for someone whose orientation was last week." Elena did not look up, suture. The door to Trauma Bay 3 slammed open hard enough to rattle the metal frame. "Who authorized this case?" The voice did not have to be loud. It rolled across the room on habit and authority. Heads snapped toward the entrance. Dr. Richard Mallory stood in the doorway in a crisp white coat. Silver hair combed back, tie still perfectly knotted despite the hour. His name badge caught the light as he stepped in, past the curtain eyes flicking over the scene. No consent form on the chart. No attending listed as primary. A doctor with a brand new badge standing at the center of it all. He looked like a man who had walked into his office and found a stranger behind his desk. Elena, the anesthesiologist, muttered under his breath. Elena placed one last stitch, then finally glanced up. "Dr. Mallory," she said. Her voice was even, almost mild. "We had a penetrating abdominal trauma systolic in the 60s on arrival. No time to wait." Mallory stopped beside the bed. Up close, he could see the neatness of the incision, the precise line of sutures already marching along the left flank. He could also see the lack of an attending signature on the board. "You are a second-year attending with no privileges for independent trauma surgery," he said. "You do not touch a case like this without clearance." If I had waited for clearance, Elena said we would be zipping a body bag instead of closing his abdomen. A nervous chuckle escaped the intern and died instantly when Mallory turned his head. In the corner, Nurse Mia Nguyen pretended to focus on the vitals monitor. She had been the first to help Elena wheel the patient in, the first to see how quickly those hands moved. She could feel the tension like static prickling at the back of her neck. Mallory let out a short, humorless laugh. "Confidence is not a substitute for seniority, Dr. Cross. Where exactly did you spend all these years? You keep talking about if your CV is as thin as a pamphlet?" Elena tied off the last knot and cut the thread. For a heartbeat, she stared at the blood-slick skin, at the rise and fall of the patient's chest. "I have been doing this for 15 years, she said quietly. On paper, Mallory replied, "You barely qualify to assist." Something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, not fear, something older. "Not on paper," she said, "on tables like this." The words hung between them, absorbed into the hum of machines. "Get this patient to ICU," Mallory snapped finally. "I will review all notes on this case myself. You and I are not finished, Dr. Cross." He stepped back, waiting for an argument, a protest, a plea. Elena peeled off her gloves. Blood had speckled the cuff of her sleeve and the thin strip of skin at her wrist between glove and fabric. A pale scar curved there, almost hidden beneath a simple watch band. She pressed her thumb over it, as if remembering something far away. "Yes, doctor," she said. She left the room first, the door swinging shut behind her. Mia followed with the gurney, pushing John Doe toward the elevator. His vitals had steadied numbers blinking on the screen. She could feel his faint warmth through the side rail. "Nice work in there," the anesthesiologist told her, half whisper, half sigh. "I just handed her what she asked for," Mia said. That was true. It was also not true at all. Later, when the rush of the trauma bay had thinned to a manageable chaos, Mia found Elena in the scrub room standing at the sink. The fluorescent lights washed the color from her face, leaving her eyes darker deeper. Water ran over Elena's hands, pale fingers moving automatically through a ritual of soap and rinse. She scrubbed harder than she needed to, as if trying to erase the warmth of another human's blood. The faint line of the scar at her wrist stood out darker when wet. "John Doe made it to ICU," Mia said. "They are calling him stable." "That is good," Elena answered. He still has a chance. You jumped in fast, Mia said. Most of us would have waited for Dr. Mallory. Elena turned off the faucet. The room grew quieter without the running water. The only sound left was the distant beeping of monitors through the wall. Do you think he would have made it if we had waited? She asked. Mia thought about the 2 bullet wounds, the thin, pale face, the way the monitor had screamed as they rolled him in. No, she admitted. Elena reached for a paper towel. In some places, she said, folding it between her fingers, waiting is what kills people. Mia frowned. You worked somewhere before, right? Before St. Augustine? Europe, Elena said, lightly. A few different hospitals. Must have been intense the way you move. Something like a smile touched Elena's mouth, but it did not reach her eyes. Sometimes, she said. She crumpled the paper towel, tossed it in the bin, and walked past Mia out into the hallway. The smell of disinfectant swept in to fill the space she left. Mia watched her go. There was a stiffness in Elena's shoulders, not quite tension, not quite pain. The hospital hummed around them indifferent. At the far end of the hall, beyond the glass doors, the city glowed orange against the night. Sirens wound up somewhere below, climbing the side of the building in thin, high arcs. Mia listened for a moment, then turned back to the nurses' station. Behind glass in a small office, Mallory stared at a screen with Elena's file open. The cursor blinked near a line he had skipped over before. Prior service U.S. Army Medical Corps, details classified. He frowned, jaw tightening. Outside, the sirens kept coming. Morning brought no quiet to St. Augustine. It just traded sirens for phones. By 7, the surgical floor hummed. Coffee steamed in paper cups, printers spat out lab results. Residents shuffled past each other with dark circles and clipped greetings. The city outside the windows glared white in the winter sun. Elena stood at the nurse's station, reading through the overnight notes on John Doe. Stable vitals, good urine output, lab work improving. The words sat clean and orderly on the page, nothing like the chaos he had carried in on the stretcher. She let herself feel a small private satisfaction. Dr. Cross. Mallory's voice came from behind her. He did not raise it. He did not need to. She turned. His coat was fresh, his tie a muted navy pattern. There was no sign he had been at the hospital at 2 a.m, yet she knew he had stayed late. There was a tension in his jaw, a tightness around his eyes. In my office, he said. He was already walking away before she answered. Residents stepped aside to let him pass. Elena followed. His office sat at the far end of the corridor, a glass box perched above the city. Wooden shelves lined the walls, heavy with textbooks and framed journals. Diplomas marched in neat rows behind his desk. A photograph showed him shaking hands with a smiling governor. Another showed him at a podium at some conference, frozen mid-sentence, hand lifted, as if rendering judgment. Mallory closed the door and took his seat. He did not offer her a chair. He clicked his mouse. The screen lit his face in cold blue. John Doe's chart appeared, then the CT images, then the operative note with her signature at the bottom. Do you know what these words mean, Dr. Cross? He asked, tapping the screen. Trauma surgery privileges, chain of command, protocol. I understand them, she said. Do you? His gaze fixed on her. Because what I see is a junior attending deciding that a full system of checks and balances does not apply to her. He arrived hypotensive with penetrating trauma, Elena answered. Waiting 10 or 15 minutes could have killed him. That was not your decision to make. It was when I was the only surgeon in the room. Mallory leaned back. His chair creaked softly. In institutions like this, we do not reward cowboys, he said. We follow structure. You do not get to rewrite that because you have a sense of urgency. The word cowboys hung there. It was not an accident. Elena regarded him quietly. Behind his shoulder, the city moved along the river, cars crawling over bridges. Did you have a problem with the outcome, she asked, or with the fact that I touched the case at all? He smiled without warmth. Do not mistake a good outcome for good judgment. He closed the chart. You put the hospital at risk. You put me at risk. There will be a review of your privileges. She thought of John Doe's chest rising under the ICU monitor, of the faint buzz of the ventilator. If you want to review my work, she said, I will cooperate. Oh, I intend to. He folded his hands on the desk. And in the meantime, I suggest you stay far away from any case that looks remotely like an emergency, unless explicitly told otherwise. We clear Dr. Cross. She nodded once. Yes, doctor. He looked disappointed that she did not argue. By 9, the email had gone out. Subject department meeting, mandatory attendance. Time 10:30. Location conference room B. Word traveled through whispers before it hit the inboxes. He is going after her. Already she just started. He thinks she lied on her CV. Mia slipped into the back of the conference room 5 minutes early. Rows of chairs faced a wall screen. The air smelled of coffee and dry erase markers. Through the glass wall, she could see the city spread out in bright rectangles. Elena sat in the second row back, straight, hands folded on her lap. Her face gave away nothing. She wore the same navy scrubs, the same simple watch that hid half the scar on her wrist. Mallory walked in right on time. The chatter died. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I want to address a matter of professional standards in this department." He tapped his tablet. The wall screen came to life. A CV appeared, Elena's. Her name, degrees, residency hospitals in Europe. A short list of positions. No publications in the big journals. No prestigious fellowships. Dr. Cross joined us recently from a series of European postings, Mallory said. She has stated that she has 15 years of surgical experience. He zoomed in on the dates, yet by my reading her documented training and practice account for considerably less. A murmur rippled through the room. Some doctors avoided looking at Elena. Others did not bother to hide their curiosity. Mia felt heat crawl up her neck. "Elena," Mallory said, that smooth tone never slipping, "would you like to clarify where exactly you gained those additional years?" Elena rose slowly. She did not look at the screen. "Field hospitals," she said, "forward operating bases, conflict zones." A few heads turned more sharply. Mallory raised a brow. "Conflict zones," he repeated. "How convenient. The kind of places where records can be lost, dates can be fuzzy, and no one can verify anything." "It was not convenient," Elena said. "It was bloody and loud and very real." A faint silence followed that, different from the earlier one. Something in her voice had shifted. "And yet here you are, a new attending with limited privileges," Mallory said. "Here we cannot take your word over the processes in place." He let that sink in, then clicked to the next slide. 2 CT images side by side, one labeled John Doe, 7:14 p.m. The other John Doe, 7:58 p.m. "This is the case from last night," he said. "A gunshot victim operated on without authorization. I want everyone to understand that no matter how skilled you believe you are, you cannot circumvent established hierarchy. Not in my department." In the back row, a senior surgeon cleared his throat as if to speak, then thought better of it. Another stared at the floor. Mia watched Elena. The younger woman's face did not flush. Her jaw did not tighten. If anything, she went still. It reminded Mia of something she had seen once in a documentary about wild animals, the way a predator went quiet before deciding whether to bolt or bite. Elena turned her head slightly. "I am not here to be an exception," she said. "I am here to work within the system you have. When someone is dying on the table, this system should help us move faster, not slower. That is all I will say." She sat down. Mallory did not invite further comment. "Thank you," he said as if she had just given a bland report. "We will be reviewing all recent emergency cases handled by Dr. Cross." The meeting dissolved into shuffling and low voices. No one spoke to Elena on the way out, not openly. In the hall, Mia hurried to catch up. "That was rough," she said softly. Elena gave a small shrug. "He is protecting what he believes in," she said. "His way of doing things." "And what about your way?" "For now, I am the new one here." She smiled without brightness. "New people do not get ways. They get warnings." They were halfway back to the nurse's station when the pager on Mia's hip shrieked. "Trauma alert, MVA, ETA, 10 Mini." Mia read the message and felt her stomach drop. "Car accident," she said. "High speed. They flagged it red." Elena looked toward the emergency entrance as if she could already hear the ambulance backing in. "Who is on call for trauma?" she asked. "Mallory," Mia said. "He took the day. Big case later." The trauma bay was ready by the time the ambulance slid into the dock, backing up until its rear doors almost kissed the hospital wall. The double door swung open and a paramedic jumped down. "Male 19, she called. High-speed rollover on the interstate. Son of Senator Whitford. Hypotensive in the field. We got his pressure back with fluids, but he is unstable." The name hit the room like another siren. Senator Whitford. Everyone knew the face from television. Mia felt the energy change sharpen. They rolled the gurney in. The boy was pale under the blood and glass dust, neck brace, chest barely rising against the straps. Mallory arrived as they pushed him toward the CT scanner. His expression had hardened into something Mia could not easily read. He snapped into command with the ease of long habit. "Get me a full trauma panel. Cross-match blood. Call the OR. We are going to need to move fast." Mia glanced toward the back of the group. Elena stood there out of the way, eyes tracking every movement. She did not speak. She did not offer. She knew better. The scans came back ugly. In the control room, the images glowed on the monitor. Free fluid in the abdomen. A smear of white that meant blood where there should not be any. "Internal bleeding," Mallory said. "Probable mesenteric injury, maybe liver." He turned to the tech. "Send him up, or 2 now." The operating room smelled faintly of warmed saline and metal. Lights blazed overhead. The senator's son lay draped in prepped skin-scrubbed iodine yellow. His eyelashes were still dusted with what looked like road grit. Mia watched from the observation deck above, her hands pressed to the glass. Elena stood beside her, arms folded, eyes fixed on the table. Clamp, Mallory said down below. He opened the abdomen and found a red lake waiting. Blood welled up faster than the suction could take it away. His hands moved swiftly, searching for the source, but each grasp brought up more red and little else. Pressure dropping, the anesthesiologist warned. Heart rate 140. Mallory clamped one branch, then another, chasing the bleeder through the pooling mess. Sweat shone along his hairline. His fingers slipped for the first time Mia had ever seen. He is looking in the wrong place, Elena said so quietly Mia almost missed it. What? The bleeder. Elena's eyes never left the field. It is deeper, near the root of the mesentery. If he keeps clamping where he is, he will shut down the bowel and never touch the real source. Tell him, Mia said. He will not listen. He is going to lose him. The monitors below began to scream in a steady rising alarm. Nurses moved faster, swapping out suction canisters, hanging more blood. Mallory's shoulders bunched as he leaned in, elbows deep in a body that was rapidly losing its volume. He paused, chest heaving. For the first time, he looked up toward the glass. His gaze snagged on Elena. Mia saw something pass between them. Pride, fear, calculation. Elena was already moving. She left the observation deck without a word. Mia watched her disappear through the door, then reappear a minute later on the other side of the glass, down in the scrub area. She scrubbed in fast hands, flying through the motions with a speed that spoke of muscle memory. The circulating nurse tied her gown. She took a pair of gloves. The OR doors opened. Head snapped toward her. Mallory's voice was sharp. You are not on this case. Elena stepped up to the table, eyes on the wound, not on him. Retract here, she said to the surgical tech. Suction there. Do not touch the aorta. Mallory stiffened. This is my room, Dr. Cross. Then decide whether your room is going to have a living patient in it, she answered, right now. The anesthesiologist spoke up, tension in his voice. Doctor, we are losing him. Pressure is in the 50s. If someone has a better idea, I am all ears. Silence pressed thick against the tile. Mallory's hands hovered, suspended in indecision. Very slowly, he stepped back. Elena slid into the space he left. Her fingers disappeared into the blood. For a moment, she stopped moving entirely, as if listening to something only she could hear. Then they began again, precise and sure, tracing along pulsing structures until she found the one that mattered. Clamp, she said. The tech passed the instrument. She closed it over the artery with a soft final click. The monitor changed. The shrill alarm dropped to a steady high line. The numbers climbed. Pressure is coming up, the anesthesiologist said. 100/60 and climbing. Elena did not answer. She checked for any other active bleeding, worked quickly to secure what she had found, then began the slow work of closing. When she finished, her shoulders sagged a fraction. She stripped off her gloves and tossed them into the bin. He will need ICU monitoring, she said. Her voice carried clearly enough to reach Mia behind the glass. Watch for compartment syndrome and sepsis. Call me if his lactate does not trend down. She stepped away from the table. Mallory stared at her as if seeing a stranger. Later, after the senator's son had been transferred to ICU and the OR had been reset, Elena was called to Mallory's office again. This time he did not pace. He sat at his desk, suspension forms laid out neatly between them. You disobeyed a direct instruction, he said. You entered my operating room after I explicitly told you not to. You disrupted the chain of command in front of the entire team, in front of the son of a sitting senator. Elena stood across from him, hands at her sides. He is alive, she said. That is not the point. It is the only point that mattered on that table. Mallory picked up a pen. His fingers did not shake. This department does not need surgeons who think they can manufacture their own authority, he said. Effective immediately, you are suspended from clinical duties pending a full review. Sign here. He slid the form toward her. Mia would later remember the sound the pen made when Elena picked it up. A small click in a quiet room. Elena read the page. Her expression did not change. Do you want me to argue with you, doctor? She asked. He hesitated. I want you to understand the consequences of your actions. I do. She bent over the paper and signed her name in a steady, compact hand. She set the pen down and straightened. Some people have dismissed me before, she said. I survived them. This is just another room. She took the carbon copy, folded it once, and left. Mia waited near the elevators when Elena came out, a cardboard box in her arms. Inside were a pair of extra scrubs, a mug with a chipped handle, a small notebook with a black elastic band. You're just going to walk out? Mia asked. Elena shifted the box slightly, finding a better grip. I am not walking out, she said. I am being walked out. Different thing. You saved that boy. He was bleeding, Elena said. I know what to do with bleeding. Mia searched her face. There is more to you than that file says, she murmured. Elena did not answer. She pressed the elevator button. When the door slid open, she stepped in, the box held close. The doors closed between them. That evening after her shift, Mia sat in the dim light of the nurse's lounge with her laptop open. The hospital's staff portal flickered to life. She typed in her credentials, navigated to the directory, and pulled up Elena's profile. Name, age, education, residency in Europe, short-term contracts. Her eyes dropped to the bottom of the screen. Prior service U.S. Army Medical Corps, assignment details classified. Mia leaned back in her chair. The hum of the vending machine filled the silence. Through the narrow window, Chicago's lights blinked in the early dark. She stared at that single word. Classified. Her hands trembled just a little as she closed the laptop. The next day began quietly, at least on paper. By late afternoon, the winter light had gone flat and gray over Chicago. Snow clung in dirty ridges to the curb. Inside St. Augustine, the air felt dry and recycled, full of the smell of coffee and disinfectant. In the locker room, Elena set her cardboard box on the bench. Her name still hung on a strip of tape on the metal door, black letters stark against dull gray. She opened the locker. Inside was not much. A spare pair of running shoes, a folded sweatshirt, a photograph pressed behind the mesh edges curled from humidity. She hesitated, then took the picture down. It showed a group of people in faded fatigues standing in front of a tent somewhere sun-bleached and colorless, faces blurred by heat and distance, sand instead of snow in the background. She stared at it for a long breath, then slipped it into the notebook in her box. On the other side of the room, a television murmured with the volume low-tuned to a local news station. Traffic report, weather, a segment on holiday shopping. Nothing about her, nothing about classified files. She closed the locker and peeled off the strip with her name. The tape came away with a soft rip. For a second, the empty metal reflected her face, distorted by the slight dents. Overhead, the hospital intercom crackled. Attention all departments. Mass casualty incident declared. Repeat mass casualty incident. All available staff report to emergency. Code Silver. The words rolled over the room in a flat, practiced cadence. For a heartbeat, they did not feel real. Then the sirens grew louder. Somewhere below, more ambulances were converging, their cries climbing up the concrete like a flock of metal birds. Elena's hand tightened on the box. Footsteps thundered past the locker room door. Someone shouted for more stretchers. Someone else called out for blood bank. She stood still, the box anchored against her hip. The scar at her wrist throbbed under the watch band. Do not, she told herself quietly. The intercom repeated the message. Mass casualty incident. All available staff report to emergency. The word available stuck. She had a suspension form in her pocket. On paper, she was not available. On paper, she was already gone. She stepped into the hall anyway. The corridor that led to the elevators was a river of bodies, now residents and nurses pouring toward the ER. Some faces were pale, others pumped full of adrenaline. A gurney nearly clipped her as it flew by. Mia appeared from the flow hair, half pulled loose from its bun, eyes wide. She grabbed Elena's arm. You cannot be here, Mia said. You are suspended. Security will throw you out. Then they can throw me out later, Elena said. She shifted the box into Mia's hands. Hold this for me. Elena, if Mallory sees you. People are coming in broken, Elena said. He can see me after they stop bleeding. There was no heat in her voice, only a firm, simple clarity. Mia looked at the box, then at Elena. For a moment she seemed to consider arguing. Sirens wailed closer, another ambulance taking the turn too fast outside. Fine, Mia said. Elena was already moving. The ER had shed whatever order it usually pretended to have. Curtains were shoved aside. Extra beds had been rolled into the hall. The waiting room had emptied, the chairs pushed back to make room for more stretchers. The first wave hit like a tide. The automatic doors opened and paramedics poured through with patients in tow, faces smeared with soot, clothes torn, eyes wide and glassy. The smell of burnt cloth and something sharper drifted with them. Explosion, a paramedic shouted over the din. Downtown, elevated track loop line, multiple blast injuries, more incoming. Elena took in the quick details. A man clutching his side, blood soaking through his coat. A woman gasping, hand pressed to her chest. A child carried in someone's arms, limp lips blue around the edges. Triage tags swung from wrists and zippers, red, yellow, black. Dr. Cross, a resident, blurted, startled to see her. You are not on the schedule. I am here now, she answered. Who is triage lead? The resident hesitated. No one, I guess. Charge nurse is swamped. Mallory is in surgery upstairs. Good, Elena said. She snatched a pile of gloves from a passing cart and pulled a pair on as she walked. Anyone who is breathing and talking goes to the far hall. Anyone who is not talking but breathing, put them along this wall. No pulses checked twice. Let me see every chest that sounds like a broken instrument. The words came out steady, crisp. People moved without questioning. It felt less like giving orders and more like pointing water downhill. The first patient they brought her was a man in his 50s, soot smeared across his forehead, shirt torn open to reveal bruises spreading over his ribs. His breaths were shallow, one side of his chest barely rising. Elena, Mia said, appearing at her side. He was 4 cars from the blast, possible crush injuries. Elena pressed her stethoscope to his chest. Nothing on the right, harsh wheezing on the left. Tension pneumothorax, she said. Get me a chest tube tray, now. Doctor, he is not registered yet, a clerk protested. We do not even have his name. He has lungs, and they are disagreeing with each other, Elena said. That is enough for me. Mia moved hands already pulling supplies. The world narrowed to a rectangle of exposed skin between ribs. Elena marked the line between 2 ribs with a quick press of her finger. The skin was cold. The man's eyes found hers wild. This is going to hurt, she told him. Try to stay with me. She made the incision bluntly dissected through muscle until she felt the give of the pleural space. Air hissed past her glove with a wet sigh as she advanced the tube. The patient coughed once, then took a fuller breath. Breath sounds on the right, Mia said. Seal it, Elena said. Next. A woman came in next, bent over herself, arms wrapped around her abdomen. Blood seeped between her fingers. Her skin had taken on a gray, washed-out tone. Carla, 32, a paramedic shouted. She was near the platform when it blew, belly pain, blood pressure tanking en route. Roll her, Elena said. As they settled the woman on the bed, Elena pressed her palm against the abdomen. Firm. Distended. The woman winced, teeth gritted. Where does it hurt the most? Elena asked. Everywhere, the woman gasped. Her eyelids fluttered. Probable internal bleed, Elena said. Get a unit of O-negative hanging. Call for an OR. She does not belong out here. The board is full, the resident stammered. We do not have a room ready. Then make one, Elena said. She will not wait politely. She scribbled her initials on the triage board without thinking, then moved on. The third patient that landed in front of her was small, too small. A boy, maybe 8, ash streaked across his cheeks, hair full of tiny shards. He wheezed wetly, each breath a battle. His eyes rolled, pupils dancing. Name's Luis, the paramedic said. Got separated from his mother. He was screaming on scene, then just went quiet. Elena knelt so she was level with his face. Luis, she said, can you hear me? His gaze did not focus. His chest rose in short, frantic pants. She listened. The upper airway gurgled. There was debris in there, maybe blood, maybe dust. He needs an airway, Elena said. Bag him. Mia positioned the mask and began squeezing, but the chest lifts were uneven. Tube tray, Elena said. A resident hovered. Do you have credentials for pediatric intubation? Elena's eyes flicked up, cutting. Do you have a better plan? She asked. He shut his mouth. She slid the laryngoscope into place, lifting the boy's jaw. The world narrowed again this time to the tiny view framed by the metal. Swollen tissue. A flash of pale cords. She passed the tube through. Tube is in, she said. Confirm. The steady whoosh in the boy's chest answered. As they secured the tube, Mia wiped a streak of dust from the child's forehead. His mother is going to come through those doors looking for him, Mia said. Then we will have something good to tell her, Elena said. The second wave of patients began to arrive. Someone shouted for more stretchers. Another voice called for the blood bank to release everything they could spare. 20 minutes later, the ER looked like a war painting. Gauze stained copper and brown. Floors streaked where gurneys had rolled through spilled fluids. The air thick with that particular mix of sweat, chemicals, and fear. Mallory finally arrived, then lab coat flaring behind him as he pushed through the chaos. His eyes found Elena almost immediately. What is she doing here? He snapped. I suspended you. She is saving people, Mia said before she could stop herself. Mallory ignored her. I want you out of my emergency department, he told Elena. Before she could respond, the paramedics burst through the doors with another stretcher. This one had 2 police officers flanking it. The man on the gurney wore no coat. His shirt was shredded, his torso a map of burns and embedded metal. A close-cropped haircut clung to his skull in damp spikes. A black tactical watch still clung to his wrist face, cracked. Male, mid-30s, the paramedic shouted. Found near the center of the blast. No ID, but he had this. He held up a leather wallet with a badge tucked inside. It flashed gold and unfamiliar. Federal, one of the officers said. They radioed ahead. He is priority 1. Mallory's head snapped toward the stretcher. Get him to OR1, he said, now. He looked at Elena, jaw clenched. Stay away from this, he told her. She watched as they rolled the man past the gurney wheels, rattling. Blood dripped from the sheet, dotting the floor. In OR1, the lights blazed to life. The man lay on his back chest, rising unevenly under the ventilator. The anesthesiologist worked quickly, lines snaking into arms and neck. Mallory scrubbed and jaw locked. He entered the field with practiced steps. When he opened, the abdomen heat and the smell of copper washed over him. The cavity was full of blood and shredded tissue. Bits of metal glinted like teeth. Massive liver laceration, he said. Probable bowel injury, maybe aorta. He reached in feeling for pulsations for landmarks, but everything felt wet and indistinct. Blood slicked his gloves, ran down his forearms. Pressure is dropping, the anesthesiologist said. 70/40, heart rate 150. Mallory clamped where he thought the source might be. The bleeding slowed in one area and surged from another. He swallowed. His tongue felt thick. More suction, he said. The tech complied. The sound of the suction filled the room, a low, hungry roar. Outside in the hallway, Elena stood by the OR window watching. She whispered the anatomy under her breath. Aorta, celiac trunk, superior mesenteric, renal, iliac. The pathway she had walked so many times before in rooms far away from this one. Inside, Mallory's shoulders hunched. His hands moved faster, less precise. I cannot see, he muttered. It is all just... The words trailed off. Pressure 50/30, the anesthesiologist said. Panic edged his voice now. He is circling the drain, doctor. Mallory froze. For the first time since she had met him, Elena watched him hesitate, not out of arrogance, but out of fear. She turned to the scrub nurse. Open the door, she said. You are not on this case, the nurse whispered. He is going to die in there, Elena replied. Open the door. Something in her face made the nurse move. The door swung inward. Heat and the metallic tang of blood hit her first. Then the sight of the open abdomen, the red pool, the scattered gleam of shrapnel. Mallory looked up. Get out, he snapped. You are not cleared to be here. Elena stepped to the edge of the table. 3-centimeter incision along the left lower quadrant, just off the midline, she said. You are too close to the aorta. The main leak is coming from a branch off the mesenteric. If you keep clamping where you are, you will crush everything and never hit the source. You think you know this better than I do, he demanded. Yes, she said simply. The anesthesiologist spoke rapidly, eyes on the monitor. Pressure is in the 40 range. We are running out of time. Somebody take the lead. The room held its breath. Mallory's hands hovered over the wound. Sweat trickled down his temple, caught on the edge of his mask. He stepped aside. Then do it, he said. The words came out rough, if you are so sure. Elena slipped into his place, hands already moving. She did not waste words now. She adjusted the retractors, deepened the angle, and reached for the hidden vessel with the kind of touch learned under conditions that never made it into hospital orientations. Clamp, she said. The instrument slapped into her palm. She set it, closed it. The torrent slowed. Another, she said. She worked down the line, each move deliberate. Slowly, the field cleared. The suction changed pitch. Pressure is climbing, the anesthesiologist called. 60, 70, 90/50. No one spoke. They only watched. Elena finished securing the bleeders, inspected the damage with quick sweeps of her eyes, then began the layered closure. Her stitches were small and even, as if nothing upstairs in the man's chest had been close to stopping. When she tied the last knot, she let out a breath she had been holding for too long. He is not out of danger, she said. He will need ICU broad coverage serial exams. Watch for sepsis, renal failure, everything you already know. She peeled off her gloves. Blood smudged the skin between her wrist and the cuff. The scar there stood out pale against the red. She turned toward the door. They swung open before she reached them. 2 men in dark suits stood in the frame. Their shoes were clean. Their expressions were not. Both wore badges clipped to their belts. The seal on each glinted formal and cold. Dr. Elena Cross, the taller one, asked. The OR went quiet again. The hum of the vents and the ticking of the clock suddenly sounded loud. Yes, Elena said. We need you to come with us, he said. Now. This is a matter of national security. Mia, watching through the glass, felt her pulse stutter. Mallory blinked as if a piece of the world had shifted under his feet without warning. What is this, he asked. She is suspended. She just violated protocol in my operating room. You cannot just walk in here and... The second agent turned his head just enough to look at him. Doctor, he said, she just saved one of our own when no one else could. She is coming with us. The first agent stepped aside, waiting. Elena glanced once toward the observation window. Through the reflection, she caught Mia's eyes. Elena gave the smallest nod. Then she walked out of the operating room past the lights and the stainless steel and the trays and fell into step between the 2 men in suits as the doors closed behind them. The ride from the hospital blurred into a sequence of gloved hands and locked doors. Elena did not remember when someone had taken her scrubs for evidence, when someone else had handed her a clean pair. She only knew that by the time she stepped out of the unmarked black sedan, Chicago had fallen away behind her, and the air tasted different. The sign at the edge of the compound did not say CIA. It did not have to. The security checkpoint did all the talking. Guards in dark uniforms checked badges and cargo. Cameras followed every angle. The car rolled forward in short, measured jumps, then passed through a final gate that rattled behind them with a heavy clank. Inside, the corridors were cooler than the hospital, the light softer but no less unforgiving. Painted walls instead of tile-frame photographs instead of hospital art. There was still the faint scent of antiseptic, but it mingled with something else, paper and recycled air. The taller agent led the way. The shorter walked half a step behind Elena. Neither spoke. At an elevator, the taller agent swiped a card. The doors opened without a chime. They rode down, not up. In the polished metal of the elevator wall, Elena saw her own reflection. Hair pulled back tight. Scrubs that belonged to another facility, another world. A faint line of dried blood at the edge of her collar that no one had caught. Her hands were steady. The doors opened to a level that could have been any high-end research wing. Floors shone. Doors were marked with numbers instead of names. A glass wall revealed a cluster of workstations and screens alive with maps and data. A man with iron-gray hair waited in the hall, flanked by 2 more agents. Elena Cross, he said, as if confirming something for himself. He wore no badge on his belt. His authority sat entirely in the way people looked at him. Yes, Elena said. He offered his hand. Samuel Keene, he said, Director of Operations. His grip was firm, his skin cool. Thank you for coming on such short notice, he added. I was not given much of a choice, Elena said. One corner of his mouth moved. You were given a car, he said. That is more than some people get. He turned. Walk with me. They moved down the hallway together. As they passed one intersection, Elena caught a glimpse into a glass-walled room. A cluster of analysts sat hunched over monitors showing grainy footage, satellite images, names, and redacted lines. You were in Kandahar once, Keene said. It was not quite a question. I worked there, she said. Then you know what happens when the wrong person pulls the wrong trigger, he said. We try to keep things like that from happening here. They stopped at a set of double doors, marked with a small discreet sign. Medical operations. Inside was an operating suite that could have belonged to any major hospital. Overhead lights, stainless steel, banks of monitors. The difference lay in the guards at the corners and the quiet intensity of the staff. A woman in uniform waited near the central workstation. Her hair was cropped close, the silver eagle on her collar caught the light. She straightened when she saw Elena and brought her hand up in a salute. Major Cross, she said. The rank slid over Elena like a coat she had left hanging in a far-off closet. That is not my title anymore, Elena said. It still is in some files, the woman replied. Colonel Rachel Harlow. They lowered their hands. You two know each other, Keene asked. We have crossed paths, Harlow said. Most of the time with bad coffee and mortar fire. Memories moved in Elena's mind. Red dust. A tent lit by a single dangling bulb. Harlow standing in the doorway, helmet tucked under one arm, asking how long until the next soldier could be moved. You were the one who insisted on real gauze instead of those cheap field dressings, Elena said. And you were the one who yelled at my commanding officer until he gave it to you, Harlow answered. Keene cleared his throat lightly. History lesson later, he said. We have a problem in the present. He turned to the central monitor and tapped a key. An image filled the screen. A CT scan axial slice through the thorax and upper abdomen. Bone and soft tissue rendered in shades of gray. At the center near the spine, 2 bright white fragments of metal sat like tiny broken teeth. This is Agent Noah Briggs, Keene said. Field operative. He took 2 rounds during an extraction in East Africa 3 days ago. One was superficial, the other was not. He zoomed in on the larger fragment. It nestled close to the rounded shape of the spinal cord, a fraction of a centimeter away. The local team got him out of immediate danger, Harlow said. Stabilized him, patched what they could. They did not have the tools or the time to go after this. Elena studied the image. The fragment's edges were sharp, irregular. Where is he now, she asked. Down the hall, Keene said. Sedated, on support, running out of time. He has already shown signs of cord compromise, Harlow added. Weakness in the lower extremities, loss of sensation. If that fragment shifts even slightly, or if the swelling increases, it is over. What about neurosurgery, Elena asked. There are at least 10 surgeons on the East Coast who can do miracles with spines. Most of them have never worked in a room where the power went out mid-procedure and the generator failed, Keene said. They have never gone after hot metal in unstable tissue that has already been through hell. Harlow's gaze rested on Elena. You have, she said. Keene tapped another key. A different file came up, this one not an image but a page with dense text. Her name sat at the top. Elena did not need to read the rest. You keep good records, she said. We keep the important ones, Keene replied. He turned back to the scan. You did 2 cases in similar territory, he went on. One in Kandahar, one in Mosul, both under less than ideal conditions, both with foreign material this close to the cord. Both walked out of the hospital upright. That was a long time ago, Elena said. The cord has not moved, Harlow said. The difference now is better imaging, better tools, and a room that does not shake when something hits the wall outside. Elena looked at the scan again. In her mind, she traced the path a bullet might have taken, the way tissue would have reacted. She thought of the man in OR1 back in Chicago, chest open, blood running down the sides of the table. "What is his window?" she asked. "Hours," Keene said, "not days. And if I say no," Harlow answered that, "then we roll the dice with someone else and spend the next 10 years wondering if the coin landed on the wrong side." Silence settled for a moment. Elena exhaled. "I will need a team that can move when I move," she said. "No one who hesitates. No one who freezes when things get messy." "You can choose anyone you want from our side," Keene said. "Names, specialties, whatever you need." "I want one from yours," Elena said. "Nurse Mia Nguyen from St. Augustine." Keene made a small note on a tablet. "She is already en route," he said. "We figured you might ask for someone familiar." "Good," Elena said. She hesitated. "And I want Dr. Richard Mallory," she added. Harlow's eyebrows lifted. "The one who suspended you," she said. "He knows how to hold a clamp," Elena said. "He just needs to remember he is not the only one in the room." Keene considered her for a moment. "Arranging that will upset a few people at your hospital," he said. "They have already been upset today," Elena said. "This will not make it worse." Keene nodded once. "Done," he said. Mia arrived less than an hour later, dropped at a side entrance in borrowed clothes, and hastily signed non-disclosure forms. She looked out of place in the polished corridor hospital badge still clipped to her pocket. "Of all the places I expected to see you again," she said when she spotted Elena, "this was not on the list." Elena allowed herself a quick, thin smile. "Long day," she said. Mia's gaze swept over the facility, the monitors, the guards. "Where exactly are we?" she asked. "A basement that does not officially exist," Elena said. "Ready to work?" Mia drew in a breath. "Yes." A few minutes later, Mallory appeared. He looked different without his white coat. The casual clothes the CIA had given him sat stiff on his frame. His eyes were sharp, darting between faces and walls. "This is outrageous," he had said in the car, but he had come anyway. Now he stopped when he saw Elena Mia at her side, Colonel Harlow standing nearby. "Dr. Cross," he said. There was no sarcasm in his tone, just wariness. "Dr. Mallory," she replied. Keene joined them, hands clasped behind his back. "Doctor," he said to Mallory, "thank you for agreeing to assist." "I did not exactly agree," Mallory said. "I was told." "You were invited strongly," Keene corrected, "because Dr. Cross asked for you." Mallory looked at Elena as if she had spoken in another language. "You could have had anyone," he said. "You chose someone you do not trust." "I never said I did not trust your hands," she said. "I said I did not trust your timing." The silence that followed was not hostile, only heavy. Colonel Harlow broke it. "Gentlemen and ladies," she said, "we have a patient waiting." They moved to the scrub area. Elena washed her hands in the stainless steel sink. The water was cooler than the hospital's, the soap a different brand, but the ritual was the same. Fingers, palms, wrists. The scar on her wrist stood up under the water, a pale crescent. Beside her, Mia scrubbed in, lips pressed together, shoulders squared. On the other side, Mallory worked more slowly, as if buying time. "Have you ever done spinal work like this?" he asked. "Not with this view," Elena said. "The images alone are a luxury." "That is not what I meant." "I know," she said. They dried, gloved, gowned. The weight of the lead apron settled over Elena's shoulders as she stepped into the operating room. Agent Noah Briggs lay on the table, face, pale beard shadowed. Tubes and lines sprouted from both arms. A ventilator hissed softly. His spine was framed by a halo of metal and plastic, the positioning device holding him in a precise, vulnerable angle. Above them, a bank of monitors showed real-time imaging of his spine from different perspectives. The offending fragment glowed bright. "Vitals are stable for now," the anesthesiologist said. "He has had as much sedation as I can safely give him." Elena took her place at the head of the field. Mia stood at her side, instruments laid out in a neat arc. Mallory moved opposite hands, hovering above the drapes, waiting. "Everyone in this room has been read in," Keene said from behind the glass. "You know what is at stake." Elena tuned him out. The world shrank to the rectangle of exposed skin and the glowing outlines on the monitor. "Knife," she said. The first incision was small, controlled. She worked through layers of tissue with careful, measured strokes. Electrocautery sizzled, a faint smell of char rising and then dispersing. "Retractor," she said. Metal slipped into place, parting muscle gently. The deeper structures came into view, pulsing faintly with the rhythm of the heart. "Micro-retractor," she added, and a little more magnification. The monitor zoomed in. The fragment looked larger now, shark-like, in its proximity to the delicate cord. Sweat prickled at the back of her neck. She ignored it. Her hands moved with a deliberation that did not feel slow. Every motion counted. Every pause meant something. There were no jokes in this room, no nervous chatter, just the soft requests for instruments and the murmured confirmations. At the 2-hour mark, Mallory's fingers began to cramp. He flexed them once, grateful for the change, when Elena said switch and repositioned the retractors. Mia shifted her weight, then caught herself before she sighed. Her shoulders ached. She did not mention it. At 3 hours, one fragment lay in a dish at Mia's elbow, a bloodied shard glinting under the light. That had been the easier one if such a thing existed. The second remained embedded closer, kissing the outline of the cord. Elena stared at it on the monitor. The room seemed to narrow around her. "Everyone hold," she said. Hands stayed where they were. Machines continued their steady chorus. In her mind, the room changed. The ceiling lowered, the lights flickered. She smelled dust and smoke instead of clean antiseptic. Somewhere outside something boomed. Someone shouted in another language. For a moment she stood in two places at once. Then she was back here in the silent room under Virginia soil with a man who had bet his future on a bullet and lost the first round. She shifted her grip slightly. "Bring the magnification a fraction closer," she said. .8. On the screen, the tiny world near the cord grew even larger. The fragment's jagged edges came into sharp focus. Between it and the soft gray of the cord was a sliver of space that looked impossibly thin. Her hands went still as if rooted to the air. No one spoke, no one moved. Okay, she breathed so softly it could have been to herself. "Now we do not tremble." Time folded into the space between Elena's heartbeat and her hands. The fragment sat in the heart of the image, white and sharp. The gray curve of the cord waited beside it like breath held in a chest. Her fingertips rested on the surrounding tissue without pressure. She felt the faint vibration of the man's pulse rather than saw it. Somewhere the ventilator hissed. The monitor clicked off seconds that seemed to stretch. "Microforceps," she said quietly. Mia passed them into her waiting hand, metal brushed glove with a small crisp sound. Elena slid the tips along the edge of the fragment. The slightest movement, a fraction of a millimeter, cleared a fold of tissue. Another fraction brought the gleam of metal free from its bed. "Do not breathe," Mia whispered without meaning to. No one did. Elena adjusted her grip, then closed the forceps. The fragment shifted almost imperceptibly. The cord did not shudder. The monitor did not change pitch. She lifted. The fragment rose out of the wound slick and red. "Got you," she said under her breath. The room exhaled at once. "Pressure is holding," the anesthesiologist said. "No changes in motor potential." Mia stepped forward with the small kidney dish. Elena lowered the fragment into it. It landed with a soft clink. It was an ugly thing up close, a twisted bit of metal that had been traveling too fast in the wrong place. "Keep that," Elena said. "He deserves to see what tried to undo him." She turned back to the field. There was no triumph in her posture, only focus. The absence of the fragment had changed the landscape, but the work was not finished. She inspected the area for bleeding, cleaned up residual clot, and began the careful process of closing. Each layer went back where it belonged, muscle and fascia and skin realigned. Hours after it began, the surgery ended with a final knot. The monitors continued their calm parade of numbers. Agent Noah Briggs lay still alive, his spine one threat lighter. "Good work," the anesthesiologist said, voice thick with relief. "Get him to recovery," Elena said. "Monitor his motor function when he wakes up and call me if anything looks off." She stripped off her gloves. Her fingertips tingled. The scar at her wrist felt numb. Behind the glass, Keen and Harlow watched her. In the small scrub room, Elena leaned over the sink and let the cool water run over her hands. She watched the reddish swirl go down the drain until it was clear. Mia came in behind her, pulling her mask down. "He made it through," Mia said. "He made it through this part," Elena replied. "The rest is up to his body." Mia sank onto the bench and rubbed her neck. "You did not tremble," she said. Elena shut off the tap. "I did," she said, "just not where anyone could see it." They found Mallory in the debriefing room, sitting stiffly in a plastic chair, his hands pressed flat on his thighs. He looked older in this light, as if the stages of the day had added years. Keen stood at the front of the room with a screen behind him. Harlow leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Agent Briggs is stable," Keen said. "He is still in critical care, but the immediate crisis has passed." Mallory nodded once, eyes flickering toward Elena. Keen tapped a key. The screen changed. This time it was not a scan, it was a personnel file. Lines of text, dates, locations. Elena Marie Cross, MD U.S. Army Medical Course, deployments. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria combat surgeries. 53 intraoperative mortality. 0 decorations. Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Presidential Unit, citation. The words went by faster than a casual observer could follow, but no one in the room looked away. Mallory's face drained of color. "I did not know," he said. "You did not ask," Harlow said. Her voice held no anger. It was simply true. Mallory's gaze shifted to Elena. "You have been here for weeks," he said. "You let everyone think you were untested. You let me treat you like you had never held a scalpel outside of a residency rotation. I let you treat me like a new attending," Elena said. "That is what I applied for." "You could have told me," he said. "I tried," she said. "Just not in the language you prefer." He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the pride was still there, but something else had joined it. "You were in those places," he said slowly. "Those little lines in your CV, the ones that said field hospital." She nodded. "Yes. And you came to St. Augustine because you wanted to do routine cases." "I came because I wanted to work where the explosions were metaphorical," she said. Apparently, I misjudged the odds. For the first time, Mia saw the hint of exhaustion under the dry humor. Keen clicked to another slide. There was a photograph of a familiar face. Dark hair, tactical gear, a smile that looked reluctant. "That is Agent Tyler Hale," Keen said. "You met him first in your trauma bay in Chicago when he came in as an unidentified gunshot victim." "The John Doe," Mia said softly. "Yes," Keen said. "He was undercover. Deep cover. His ID could not be found on him. You operated without waiting for authorization and saved his life. 3 days later, his partner Briggs took the bullets that landed him here." He looked at Elena. "You have now pulled both of them back from the edge," he said. "As far as our records show, you did not know either of their names until today." "I knew they were still breathing," Elena said. "That was enough reason to keep going." "A lot of people talk about service," Harlow said. "You practice it like it is muscle memory." The room was quiet. Outside, a ventilation system hummed. Later, when the paperwork had been signed and the formal words spoken, a different document arrived at St. Augustine stamped with a classification marking and a less than clear return address. In the boardroom on the 12th floor, the hospital administration sat around a long table and read it. The letter outlined in careful language the events of the previous 48 hours. It described how a suspended attending physician had intervened in a mass casualty event, how she had saved multiple lives, including that of a federal agent, and how she had then been requested by name to perform a procedure of substantial national importance. It included, with permission, a redacted summary of her military record. Someone at the table swore quietly. Someone else removed their glasses and polished them with a folded handkerchief. "This is a joke," one board member said. "This cannot be the same Dr. Cross whose file we reviewed." "It is her," the chief medical officer said. "Same date of birth, same degrees. We missed the rest because we did not know to ask for it." By the end of the week, a sanitized version of the story had leaked. Not from the CIA, which had better practice, but from someone who had read more into the hospital letter than they were supposed to. Headlines appeared. "Suspended surgeon saves federal agent. War hero hiding in city hospital. Angel of Fallujah fired before she was famous." Reporters camped outside St. Augustine's main entrance and microphones in hand. They tried to catch nurses on their way in, doctors on their way out. They tried to get a quote from Mallory. He walked past them once, eyes straight ahead, saying nothing. The cameras caught his tightened jaw, the flash of regret in his expression. The attention did not last long in a country that chewed through stories quickly, but it lasted long enough for one more development. A press conference held not by the hospital, but by the Department of Health and Human Services. At a podium in a marble-lined hall, a deputy secretary announced a new national guideline for emergency care. "In light of recent events," she said, "and in consultation with leaders in trauma and military medicine, we are issuing what will be known as the Cross Initiative, named for Dr. Elena Cross. It provides clear legal protection for physicians who in good faith act immediately to save a life in situations where waiting for formal authorization would likely result in death." She spoke of balancing safety and responsiveness, of trusting trained professionals in the field. Somewhere in the audience, a few people thought of scrubs splashed with blood and a woman with a scar on her wrist refusing to wait for a signature. At a national surgical conference a month later, Dr. Richard Mallory stood at a podium of his own. The auditorium was full. Rows of surgeons, fellows, residents. The kind of audience that had clapped for him many times when he spoke about outcomes and metrics. "This is not an easy talk for me to give," he began. He did not use slides. The screen behind him stayed dark. "I want to tell you about a mistake I made," he said. "Not in technique, although I have made those. Not in diagnosis, in judgment." He told them in clinical detail about the night a John Doe with bullet wounds came into his hospital. How another doctor moved faster than the system allowed. How he had been angrier about the paperwork than grateful for the survival. He told them about the car accident with the senator's son, about hands that went still, about another set of hands that did not. He did not dramatize. He did not ask for sympathy. "I suspended her," he said. "I wrote her up as reckless. I told the staff she was not to touch any case that mattered." There was a rustle in the crowd. "Then I watched her work in a room where no one else could, on a case that mattered more than most of us will ever see." He paused. "I valued the wrong things," he said. "I looked at her CV and decided she did not fit my idea of excellence. I chose the safety of hierarchy over the reality of skill. People survived in spite of that, not because of it." He stepped away from the podium to the sound of applause that did not feel like it belonged to him. Back in Chicago, the hospital administration called Elena into a small, quiet conference room. The view through the window showed the river and the rust-colored bridges. The walls were bare as if they had forgotten to hang the art. The chief medical officer slid a folder across the table. "We would like you to consider taking the position of Director of Emergency Medicine," he said. "Effective immediately." Elena looked at the folder but did not open it. "You want to hand me the department after suspending me from it," she said. "We want to acknowledge that we misjudged you," he replied, "and that this hospital would benefit from your leadership." "Leadership sits in every room where someone is bleeding," she said, "not just the boardroom." "That is exactly why we want you," he said. She stood and walked to the window. The city moved slowly below cars, tracing tiny lines along the streets. In the glass, she could see her reflection, the faint edge of the scar at her wrist. "Let me think," she said. He nodded. "You have time," he said, "but not too much. The department needs a direction." She left the room and walked not toward the executive offices, but toward the chapel. The hospital chapel sat tucked between radiology and oncology, a narrow room with stained glass that cast colors on the floor. The pews were short, the cushions worn. Elena sat in the second row and leaned forward, elbows on her knees. She did not pray. She watched the colors shift as clouds passed over the sun. Mia slipped in quietly and sat beside her. "They offered you the job," Mia said. "Yes," Elena answered. "And I have not decided." Mia looked at the empty front of the chapel, the unadorned wall. "They took so much from you," she said. "Recognition, trust, time." "They did not take the part that mattered," Elena said. "They did not take the skill. They did not take the choice to walk into a room when someone is dying." "You could change things from the top," Mia said. "I could also vanish into meetings and policies," Elena said. "I did not come here to argue about budgets. I came here because a person on a table does not care about my title." Mia was quiet for a long moment. "If you walk away from the offer," she said, "people will say you are unambitious." Elena smiled faintly. "People already say many things," she said. "The only ones that stay with me are the ones who walked out of OR alive." The colors on the floor shifted again. A nurse's voice murmured in the hall outside. Elena sat there until the light changed to a softer shade, and the day began to slip toward evening. 3 years later, the sirens sounded farther away. They still cried through the valleys of Chicago, but Elena heard them as an echo carried by memory. In the hills of rural Virginia, the noises were different. Crickets at dusk, the rumble of a pickup on a gravel road, wind moving through trees. The building in front of her had been a barn once. Weathered boards, a wide doorway big enough for a tractor. Someone had painted the words Med Front Training Center over the entrance in plain block letters. Elena stood just inside the open doors and watched her students. They were not residents or interns. Most wore jeans and work boots. Some had fire department patches on their sleeves. Others had sheriff badges clipped to their belts. A few wore no uniform at all, only the anxious expressions of people who had seen too much news footage and decided they wanted to do more than watch. On the concrete floor, plastic torsos and foam limbs lay in rows. Gauze and tourniquets were spread out on tables. The air smelled of dust and latex. "All right," Elena said. Her voice carried easily in the high space. "One more time. You have a victim with heavy bleeding from a leg wound. You have 2 hands and a minute. Show me what you do." A young woman in a volunteer firefighter shirt crouched beside the mannequin. Her fingers fumbled with the tourniquet strap, trying to tighten it. Elena knelt next to her. "Not like that," Elena said quietly. "Here." She took the woman's hands and repositioned them. Her touch was firm but not rough. She showed where to place fingers, how hard to pull, when to stop. "Feel that," Elena said. "That is the difference between slowing the bleed and stopping it. You want stopping." The firefighter nodded. Sweat shone at her temples. She adjusted her grip and pulled until the strap bit into the foam. "Good," Elena said. "Now lock it." Mia watched from the side, arms crossed, a clipboard in one hand. She wore jeans and a Med Front t-shirt, hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her badge from St. Augustine was nowhere in sight, tucked away in a drawer hundreds of miles away. "You are getting good at that," Mia said later when the class had broken for water and fresh air. "At tourniquets?" Elena asked. "At rearranging their hands," Mia said. "The way you used to do with the residents, but with less sighing." "They listen," Elena said. "They know why they are here." Outside, the light began to tilt, turning the edges of the hills gold. A truck engine sounded on the gravel. Tires crunched to a stop. Mia glanced toward the driveway. "Looks like your afternoon guest is here," she said. Elena wiped her palms on her pants and stepped out into the cooler air. A car sat by the fence, dust still settling around its wheels. Richard Mallory stood beside it, one hand on the door, the other shading his eyes as he looked at the barn. He had retired from St. Augustine 6 months earlier. The news had mentioned it in a paragraph tucked between announcements of 2 new department heads. There had been a small reception. He had given a short speech. Then he had walked out of the hospital with a box of books and a folder under his arm. Now he closed the car door and walked toward her. "Quite a commute," Elena said. "I had time," he replied, "too much of it." He paused at the threshold just outside the barn doors and looked up at the sign. "Med Front," he read. "You always did like simple names." "They are easier to spell," she said. He stepped inside. His shoes sounded loud on the concrete, a city rhythm in a country space. He watched as one of the trainees cinched a tourniquet as another practiced packing a fake wound with gauze. "You gave up a big department for this," he said. "All those resources, all that staff." "There is a certain charm to places without committees," she said. "You walked away from a title most surgeons would fight each other to get," he said. "I walked toward this," she said. He looked at her, then at her hands. The scar at her wrist was more visible here where the light came from one side. "You are still working," he said. "Just in a different kind of operating room." She nodded. "Out there," she said, gesturing at the mannequins and the people, "they will be the first hands on the wound. Sometimes the only hands. Teaching them feels like operating by proxy." He smiled faintly. "I'm writing something," he said. "A book. They tell me that is what retired surgeons do when they cannot stop giving lectures." "About operative techniques," she asked. "About leadership," he said. "And the ways it can go wrong. I want to include your story." She watched him carefully. "Which version?" she asked. "The real one," he said. "Not the headline. The part where I made my worst decisions because I was protecting the wrong things." "You think anyone will want to read that?" she asked. "I do," he said. "More importantly, I think someone might recognize themselves in it before they suspend their own Elena cross." She thought of the residents at St. Augustine, of the doctors sitting in conference rooms, eyes fixed on slides, convinced they could never be as blind as the case studies. "Will you change my name?" she asked. "If you want me to," he said. "I came to ask your permission not to assume it." "If it helps someone avoid what you are trying to describe," she said, "then leave it." He nodded, the line of his throat working as he swallowed. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Any of it?" "Leaving," she asked. "Letting them find out who you were that way," he said. "The chaos, the headlines." She thought for a moment. "I regret the time wasted," she said. "The energy spent on defending myself instead of treating. I regret the people who were made to feel small for doing what was right. But I do not regret staying quiet at the beginning." "Why not?" he asked. "If I had walked in with my medals around my neck," she said, "I would have been asking them to trust my past instead of watching what I did in front of them. I would have become the thing you used to worship, not the thing I actually am." "A surgeon," he said. "A person who shows up when blood hits the floor," she said. They stood in silence for a moment. The trainees laughed at something on the far side of the barn. Someone cursed when a practice tourniquet slipped. At the front of the room, near the whiteboard, a wooden panel hung on the wall. Mallory had noticed it when he walked in, but now he went closer. The board was smooth carved by hand. At the top, words had been burned into the surface. "In memory of those who healed before they were believed." Beneath the inscription, a list of names had been etched. Some he recognized from articles about combat medics, others from footnotes in journals about rural clinics. Volunteer responders, nurses who had died in outbreaks before their warnings were taken seriously. "You did this," he said. "I added the first names," she said. "The rest came from stories people brought me." "It is beautiful," he said. "It is necessary," she replied. "The world forgets quickly. I do not want to." His eyes shone more than the lighting required. He cleared his throat. "Do you forgive me?" he asked. She looked at him, really looked. The stiffness in his shoulders, the way his hands folded in front of him as if he were still at a lectern. "I stopped carrying that question a long time ago," she said. "Forgiving you was heavy, working is lighter." "That is not an answer," he said. "It is the only one I have," she said. He nodded, slowly accepting it. "You seem tired," he added. "I am," she said, "but it is a good tired, the kind that comes from clean work." Outside, the sky had shifted to a deeper color. The hills were silhouettes against the fading light. Somewhere in the distance, faint and far, a siren wailed. It wound through the valley, a thin note that barely reached the barn. Elena turned toward the sound. For a moment, her posture changed, shoulders tightening as if an old reflex had stirred. "That is the county ambulance," Mia said behind them. "They run this road when they are headed to the highway." Elena listened until the siren dipped, then faded. "They will find whoever needs them," she said. "You do not feel the pull to chase it?" Mallory asked. "I feel it," she said. "I learned to live with it. Someone is out there doing what I taught them. That is enough." She walked back toward the center of the barn, where the trainees were gathering around the whiteboard for the last session of the day. "Circle up," she called. "One more scenario before you go home. This one starts with you walking into a room where you are not sure you belong." They laughed, not knowing the layers in her words, and moved closer. Elena picked up a marker. Her fingers wrapped around it the same way they had wrapped around scalpels and clamps. The scar on her wrist caught the fading light through the open doors. Outside, the last echo of the sirens slipped away into the hills. Inside, the murmur of voices rose as people prepared to learn how to keep others alive. Elena watched their hands as they listened. Then she began to speak. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.